So I'm sure that's not the most common story for people growing up. So that's the world you grew up in, which I mean that's really cool that's kind of the example that you saw. I'm curious as you were growing up and kind of through childhood and then going into early adulthood, some of the things you noticed as far as how other people are approaching life, and maybe be curious about kind of feedback input you got from other people who just that's not their background. Their background is like you go to school, you get a job.
Welcome to the Business Brains B.S. podcast, the podcast for people building businesses, battling their own brains, and occasionally stepping in a little BS along the way. So we are really, really fortunate to be joined by Chris Pudewa today from Resilience Training. So Chris, glad to have you here, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? What do you do and how'd you get there?
Sure. So I own a wellness facility located in Bixby, Oklahoma. We offer personal training, physical therapy, recovery services like hyperbaric oxygen, contrast therapy, ice plunges, and nutrition services. I got my background basically managing a box gym. Are you familiar with Sky Fitness? Do you remember that gym? They had 3 locations. So over COVID, they basically closed down for 8 months and they couldn't sustain the close. And this gym from Kansas City, Genesis, came in and bought out all of their locations. And so I stayed on with Genesis short term, got promoted, really didn't like the corporate atmosphere or the lack of attention that they had to the actual deliverables. It was always just kind of like bottom line focus. And I thought that was, disingenuous to the goal of a gym, which should be health and wellness. So I left and I brought my clients with me, and initially just started as a small private training studio. But the vision was always to kind of fix this gap that I saw in the health spectrum, where people were shopping around for different health services and those health practitioners couldn't coordinate on an individual. So they would end up, finding a physical therapist one place, a trainer somewhere else, a nutritionist somewhere else. And I couldn't get the physical therapist on the phone. I couldn't get the nutritionist on the phone. So we had a really disjointed approach to that person's health. And I thought this is a terrible way to do it. What really should happen is everybody should be in one place where we can all coordinate on the same person from the very first session. And so that's what resilience training kind of grew into, is a place where we have all of the different areas that kind of support a person's health and development in one space, and we can coordinate on them as they kind of go through that journey.
So how many do you have? How many different types of services do you have at Resilience now?
That's a good question. I mean, if we were just kind of look at big categories, we have our recovery zone, which is a membership-based category, and that includes mostly passive recovery modalities. So ice baths, saunas, compression therapy, red light therapy, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And then we have our physical therapist, who is a doctor of physical therapy, and she focuses a lot on post rehab. So people that have used their insurance to go through rehab therapy, and then unfortunately, insurance doesn't really give them enough to really get back to the sport that they're playing or get back to the life that they want to live. So that's where we would step in with additional cash-based physical therapy services. And then kind of the bread and butter of the whole business is training. We do most of our business through one-on-one and group training in general. And then to support that, we have nutrition. So is that 1, 2, 3, 4 categories? Yeah.
Okay, very nice. So who's your who's your ideal customer? I can't talk today.
We have a few different demographics. So I would say most of the people that are able to train throughout the day tend to be kind of 50 plus, retired, disposable income, want to spend time with their grandkids, and generally, are seeing the value of keeping their quality of life up as they age. So that probably makes up a good 60% of our demographic. And then the other 40% is probably composed of mostly athletes. So like high school athletes, college athletes, and people that are looking to improve their performance or bounce back from an injury.
Yeah.
So those are two, at least on paper, pretty different demographics. So that's interesting. How do you balance, the needs and demands of the one population, like these younger people who are focused on, athletic performance, kind of high physical performance. And then you have the other population that's more like, I just want to be able to keep moving and and,
Yeah.
live longer and have just a little bit better quality of life.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and it definitely is like in terms of marketing, it's been something that's been difficult to communicate because I do have two different kind of target demographics, two different avatars, if you will. Um, but the truth is that generally speaking, the athletes do need more coaching. They need more hands-on work in order to get to the level they want to be at. So there's a big incentive for them to come into the training world and to the physical therapy world. Um, and there's a similar kind of necessity for that 50 plus demographic because they feel, maybe they've gone through a few knee surgeries, hip surgeries, or whatnot. And they're like, man, if I want to pick up my grandkids, I need to do something in order to be able to do that. So both have like a similar kind of need, which is, attention to detail in terms of injury prevention and injury repair, and attention to detail in terms of progression and making sure that they make progress. So it actually works really, really well, and it creates a kind of a cool atmosphere where you have this younger, high energy crowd that's working on athletic performance, but then you also have kind of this older group of people that have a little bit maybe more life experience and are able to share with the younger group. So it actually creates a very cool day to day atmosphere in the building.
So what kind of music do you guys listen to? Because those are two very, very
Yeah,
different styles.
that's actually hilarious. Dude, it's all over the place. So, I mean, I would say safe bet is 70s and 80s rock. If I don't know who the client is, it's 70s and 80s rock. But it goes everywhere from 90s hip hop all the way through to, probably some kind of electronic music or whatnot. And generally, the person that cares the most in the room gets their pick of what the music is. If I have a 75-year-old that's like, turn this music off, it's terrible, then they get the music for the day. And I guess 80% of the time, to answer your question, it's classic rock. And 20% of the time it's probably something weird.
Okay, I like it. That's good. Yeah. So, all right. So, it's a big jump to go from being an employee to an owner, right? So, what when you said, you know what, hey, and I know you talked a little bit about, I want to kind of fix what's broken. I want to get away from the corporate side of training, but from a personal perspective, what is it that drives you for your personal side of things, kind of outside of the business, to be a business owner instead of being an employee?
That's a good question. So I would say that I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So both grandparents on both sides had their own businesses in engineering. And then my dad has his own business. His business is basically educational materials and delivering those to schools and homeschoolers. And he's been very successful with that, been able to build up his own business. So I grew up in this world of, getting through a college degree and getting a stable job and working up a corporate ladder was not the model, right? The model was looking at the community, finding a need, solving the need, and then presenting that in a compelling way. So I would say for me, it wasn't so much that, I was doing something different than what I knew. It was almost like I was doing something that I'd been trained to do from a very young age, growing up in a business and seeing how day to day that worked, even though obviously his business is dramatically different from what my business is. It definitely gave me the kind of, I guess, the confidence to try it. It made sense. It was the blueprint that I saw.
So I'm sure that's not the most common story for people growing up. So that's the world you grew up in, which I mean that's really cool that's kind of the example that you saw. I'm curious as you were growing up and kind of through childhood and then going into early adulthood, some of the things you noticed as far as how other people are approaching life, and maybe be curious about kind of feedback input you got from other people who just that's not their background is like you go to school, you get
Mhm.
a job, you know that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because going to school and getting a job was going to be my rebellious streak. So that was actually me going against the grain. So I mean, I started at OU with my major in psychology, and I had a lot of close family members who dealt with some serious mental health stuff, self harm, borderline personality disorders, that kind of thing. So I got very interested in the mental health component of basically, functioning. And so I thought, I'd go to school and I would get my psychology degree and potentially go into therapy. And then somewhere in the mix there, I realized that, maybe I wanted to instead go into criminal psychology because that seemed more exciting. This is when I'm like 17, 18. So I pick up a double major of criminology. So I'm doing psychology and criminology, but I'm also, I'm kind of an impulsive person, which I think most business owners have to have a little bit of kind of impulsiveness. So I end up getting caught with two fake IDs and then getting a reckless driving charge right after it, like all within like a 6 month span, right? And so I basically like self eliminated myself from working in any field that had to do with criminal psychology. Um, and so I was like, oh man, so I had to pivot. And at the time, the pivot was actually to a different business idea that I tried to launch. So I dropped out of school and worked on that project for a while before pivoting to fitness, which was just something that I had been doing since I was young.
Another business
Yeah,
venture,
that
selling
didn't work
weed,
very well
right?
though. The first one doesn't go as well. You learn from it.
So yeah, so that's a great question because a lot of times successful business owners have had to take a couple of steps through the mud. So what are some of the things that you learned from that original business venture that you were able to say, okay, I'm not going to step in that hole again? What are some of the things you?
Through the mud, through the BS, right? Just to reference the yeah. Um, I mean that's a good question. So I actually temporarily I had a job with my dad's business, and he was promoting his products in India at the time. So I traveled to India for about a month and a half, and I stayed there. And while I was there, I had sugarcane juice. It's really not common in the West, so I don't run into a lot of people who aren't, Indian or Pakistani who know sugarcane juice. But I had it was amazing. It was like super duper delicious, and I'm like, why is this not in the U.S., right? So I decided, okay, I should start a business selling sugarcane juice in the U.S. So that was my original business idea, and I know a lot about this, so stop me if I'm long-winded. But basically, most sugarcane juice in the U.S. is highly pesticide, or most sugarcane that's grown in the U.S. is highly pesticides. Um, and so I had to find an organic source. There was this guy that was growing organic sugarcane on the border of Texas and Mexico. So I bought a van, I bought a cooler, I bought like a juicer, and I drove down and created a business relationship with this guy growing organic stuff. And I bought a bunch of marketing materials and everything. And I was going to launch, right? Like next month, I was going to have this little trailer and sell the sugarcane juice and then expand to like a boxcar style, space. And unfortunately, the guy died actually, like right before the launch. He passed away, and I didn't have like a backup in terms of a supplier. I didn't have any second place to go to, and they shut down their whole operation when he passed. And so I was kind of left like high and dry with all this stuff and this plan for executing a strategy, but then no resources to do it. So to answer your question, I think I learned that you generally should have two equally viable options that you can take at any point, just in case one of those options for an unforeseen reason kind of falls through. And that was definitely a useful lesson for me.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm actually heading to India in 6 weeks. So now I will add
Yeah, you
sugarcane
should.
juice to my list of things
Yeah,
to do while
no,
I'm
no
there. So
ice,
very,
no ice, Eric.
very cool.
Right? Don't get it with ice.
All
Yeah,
right. So
you want to avoid the water.
straight neat,
Yep,
sugarcane juice
absolutely.
neat.
It's cool though. You'll like it. What part are you going to?
I'm going to
Goa.
Goa.
What is that near? Do you know? Like geographically, northern,
That's
southern?
a great question. I know it's
Okay.
near the
Yeah.
water.
So I was in Pune, which is basically central, close to Mumbai. That's where I flew into. So, but very cool.
Okay.
I'm excited for you, man. India is
Yeah.
a fascinating place for sure.
Yeah. No, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So,
So,
so it sounds like you've got the plan for your second business already lined out here. Once resilience takes off, are you going to go back after the sugar?
Probably not. No, I might integrate it. I might start a cafe in the next gym space and kind of have that dream come around again. It's still in the back of my head, but it's not like I don't have anything written down about it. It would just be like an impulse at the time to do it again, if that makes sense. Yeah.
so we got from criminology to selling sugarcane juice. How did we get from selling sugarcane juice to, like managing a gym?
It's a good question. So, I mean, I feel like probably Greg knows more about this maybe just due to the people you talk to, but a lot of times when there's like when a lot of things fall through for a person and they're kind of like almost facing like a dark night of the soul experience, um, they have to pivot and do something else. So for me, the sugarcane stuff fell through. I had a relationship which ended in a poor way at the same time, and the stable job that I had at the time I got fired from as well. So I had three big kind of one, two, threes that punched me down a level, and so I was just kind of a little bit lost, and I didn't know which direction to go in. And it was actually a suggestion from my father to do something with fitness because I had maintained my fitness since I was maybe 15 or so. I'd been exercising pretty consistently, playing sports and getting stronger. So he said, I think you should do that. And at the time I thought, well, okay, I need to prove to myself that if I stick with something and I really deliberately focus on it, that I can actually succeed in that area because everything that I'd tried previously to stick to had pretty much fallen through. So I needed something that was like a confirmation that if you try hard, you succeed. And so I picked personal training. I got my certification and started working at Sky, and I worked in every department. So I cleaned the toilets, I worked front desk, I worked sales, I worked in the cafeteria, the entire gym while I was getting that training certification. Um, and then after I got the certification, I started training, and I'm pretty good at talking to a wide range of people who have different life experiences because I've had so many different interests myself. And so that was kind of the pivot. It was just what can I do that I know I will potentially be able to succeed in, and I want to see if I can give myself some confirmation that hard work pays off, because up until that point I was kind of not sold on that idea.
Yeah, you mentioned that you called it a dark night of the soul type experience, and when you said that, I thought that's beautiful. Not beautiful that, like, you had hard times, but it just resonated with me because I know in my own life, some of the hardest times have been, in the end, really good for me, and better things have come after that, and so I'm curious, it sounds like that was the experience for you as well, and I think it's interesting going from, these other endeavors to, like, this is something you were already into, just like personal interest, fitness, but maybe I'm making too much of it, but it's very much to be a business owner in anything, like, you have to work hard, but you picked, like, I'm gonna focus on hard work, like, physically on myself, and then passing that on to someone else, like, it almost to me seems like stripping it down to the basics.
That's a good. I haven't thought of it that way exactly. I haven't put those words to it, but that does make sense. I think for me, like, it was almost like my brain and my emotions were too overloaded. So I had to do something that I knew I could just show up and do the same thing over and over and over again. Um, and then slowly, my emotions and brain stabilized, and that allowed me to think critically about, okay, where can I take this new skill that I have? And then the obvious conclusion to that was, oh, okay, I can pivot and turn this into a business and solve the problem which I was seeing in the gym that I was working in currently, which was that kind of a lack of continuity in the health spectrum.
So, how much of that story that you just told us played into the name, resilience training?
Really a decent amount. I remember I was sitting down and I was just brainstorming names. I had like every name I could think of on a board, and I would just go through and kind of cross out each one that I didn't like. And I think resilience was one of the last ones on there. And I thought about, like, in my own fitness journey, I've had a lot of injuries and setbacks, and I've realized that every time you are faced with an injury, it presents the opportunity for you to find strength in other areas. So you know, I had a terrible squat injury where I got stuck under a bar and my hip basically gave out on me, and I couldn't really do anything with my legs for, like, I don't know, maybe a year. It was a bad injury. But because of that, I learned a whole bunch about hip mobility and how to improve my hips, and then I could apply it to my clients. And overall, now I would say that my hip strength and mobility is probably one of the things I'm the best at, because that injury facilitated an adaptation which was resilient. And so when I was thinking about that, I'm like, that's exactly the kind of idea that I want my clients coming into it to feel, which is that your injuries and your setbacks create the opportunity for you to become stronger and adapt to them. And so that was I think the genesis of the idea of resilience.
Yeah, and we've talked on here before, Eric and I have, about the importance sometimes of just perseverance, how and sometimes as a business owner, that perseverance or resilience, is the thing that gets you from one level to the next. So how has that played out through the course of your current business? That just that resilience that you've learned over the years, how is that applied from a business perspective?
That's a great question. I mean, I was originally a partnership. So my business was started with another a person, and I'm kind of in a legal thing with them. So I can't share a whole bunch of details, but there's been stuff that's come up, and I'm sure it's that way with all businesses. There's things that come up that you don't foresee that definitely like put you on the hot seat of like, okay, how do I pivot and how do I continue to make this work for all the people that are depending on me, right? Because it's less about me and more about, the 115 so clients that we train on a regular basis. The business needs to succeed so that they can really make progress and improve and adapt. And the byproduct is that my life improves as well. So, yeah, I've definitely had some opportunities to practice resilience inside a business context as well.
I think it's interesting hearing your story because there are so many great business owners out there who have battled back from some type of a setback. And, hearing your story about being stuck under that bar, I'm going to cancel my gym membership when we're done with. No, but I do think that there's a lot of value to that. So what are maybe some other things that you've learned from some of the setbacks that you've had in your life that have shaped not only where you've got the business now, but where you're planning to take it?
Hmm. I mean, I don't know. I feel like life is like it's the story that you make it out to be, right? It can be a bunch of random things that just happen to you and you're kind of the victim of, or you can take all these different events that happen in your life and kind of you can, for lack of a better word, transmute them, alchemize them into something that propels you forward and create a story, right? Like what I told you about my story. So I think a story is very important because it gives you kind of a direction, and it gives you like a narrative that you continue to live. And I think it's also important to always go back and kind of assess the story that you are telling, and see, is that story a valid one? And I know for me, I work with a lot of clients who come in and they have stories about their injuries or their, current fitness or their weight. And sometimes those are the stories that need to be let go of. You need to let those move in order to create a new narrative and a new story of growth. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but yeah, that's definitely, I think taking the events that maybe are difficult and then shaping them into a narrative that can help you develop as a business owner, develop as a person is useful, if that makes sense.
You mentioned a while ago the importance of, basically at the end of the day, it's about giving your clients, what they came for. And that resonates with me a lot being in the field that I'm in. That was something that was really pressing on my mind when I started this business is at the end of the day, I'm providing a service. People are paying for a service. And if they're not pleased with the service they get, they won't come back. And if they don't come back, I won't have any money. And so this, real pressing need to like basically to be really good at what I do, um, and making that like that client satisfaction the top thing because that is what's gonna propel you forward long term, and so I know that's you mentioned that in your business, that's something that I feel in my business. What kinda impact do you see, like how do you see that affecting the people you work with, like the other staff, as well as the clients that you serve?
I think what I was thinking when you were talking about that is how it's kind of, it's a two-pronged thing. As a business owner, if you have staff or employees, they also matter, in addition to your client base and the people you're serving. So, one of my big goals, because I went into this as a sole proprietorship basically, um, was to provide a space where each person that I employ has the tools and the environment for them to grow and succeed, and where they feel like it's better than what they could do by themselves if they went off by themselves because they have more support, a better team around them, and everybody's basically coordinating on building each other up. And then that bleeds over into the clients, right? If I can create an environment where every trainer, physical therapist, and nutritionist basically feels like they want to learn more, where they're encouraged to become better, then the client relationship with them becomes better because the clients see that, we're excited to continue to develop ourselves just like they're excited to come in and meet with us and develop themselves.
So I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of noise out there in the health and wellness and fitness industry, right? I mean, there are a lot of options or opportunities out there for people to go and work with somebody. So what is it that makes you and Resilience different from, from the other options out there?
The style of facility that I have where there's multiple offerings in one, it isn't, at the time I kind of thought it was original. But as I'm getting into this, there's more and more places like this that are popping up where they offer a concierge service and have support from multiple different aspects. And I really think that's the way that this whole fitness industry, wellness industry is going to shift. It's going to shift to these more boutique style places that offer a more detailed approach to each person because a box gym where you just come in and work out, eventually those people are going to run into roadblocks and there's not going to be anybody there to direct them through that course. And in terms of the competition locally, I do think that there is a need for facilities like mine. So I think in a way, because we offer this wraparound service where people can be supported in multiple aspects, it does set us aside from what exists, at least in Tulsa right now. Because most of what exists in Tulsa is you have some private training facilities that focus on delivering private training. You have some box gyms that also deliver some private training and nutrition, a little bit of nutrition or recovery, but mostly they're, a facility that you get to come in and use. And then you have some wellness boutiques that offer, some of the recovery modalities that we have and maybe a little bit of the nutrition, but they lack on the actual implementation of an exercise program or a recovery program. So I think we set ourselves apart because we do have all those things integrated. So when somebody comes in, they sit down with the initial person that they're meeting with, whether that be for a physical therapy reason, for a nutrition reason, or for a personal training reason. And then immediately they get pushed into the next consultation, which would be whatever is they haven't done yet, and then into the next one. And so they end up getting about 4 free consultations with professionals in each area of their field when they very first come in. Before we ever, charge them anything, they already have a really good grasp on an evaluation by a physical therapist, a consultation with a trainer to go over their exercise history, and a breakdown of their nutrition. So they know, okay, look, I have all this information about where I'm at, and also here's the solution. Versus when you come into a gym, I did probably 1,000 consultations when I worked in a box gym. And the consultation was just incredibly limited because I wasn't coordinating with anybody else. And so I think the biggest thing that sets us apart is just we have coordination. If something comes up and I have a client who previously had a knee surgery and they're working out with me and they're like, man, my knee is just swollen today. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it. I mean, I know a lot about knees, but I can just take them to our doctor and she can look at the knee and assess it and say, you know what, I think that this or this happened and I'd like to do a few sessions with you to see if we can calm that down. Chris, can you make sure to do these 3 exercises because that'll help with this acute symptom? And then after they're done with those exercises, go ahead and put them in the compression therapy, which will help flush the lymphatic system so that they can go about their day. And so we have like a very effective approach to each kind of problem that a person would face on their fitness journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. I really like hearing that. And it sounds like you guys are giving away value. And I think that's so important as part of a process is for people to, I've always been told, give away your best stuff for free and people will come to you, right? Because you give it away, most people won't use it. They need somebody to help them actually put it into place. So I think
Eric, are you familiar with Alex Hormozy? Have you stumbled across his content? Cool. So I like Alex Hormozy a lot too because, he started in a similar industry to me. So there's a lot of parallels to his, origin story working in gyms and getting those successful. So I feel like there's much to learn from him, but his whole thing is basically, deliver massive value, right? From the get-go, you want to deliver as much value as possible. And not in like a manipulative way, but you want to overload the person with information, right? And then you want to provide the solution to how to organize the information and the approach so that they then have like a very clear, okay, I know all this stuff now. Now I can make sure that I can take the correct steps to move forward and then make it really, really simple, right? So that's similar to our approach here for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think I'm going to
Yeah.
start doing the podcast with
Gonna cancel your
breeze right
gym
strips
membership
on
and get
now.
no
So
strips, man. That's yeah, that'd be good.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. All right. So last question here. If you had one piece of advice
Oh, that's a good question.
for,
I mean, I think, I could relate it to stuff we've already talked about, but what I'm currently going through and the most recent lesson that I've learned is probably what I would say, which is, um, you can have a idealistic vision for your business, which I do. I see it as a coordination of professionals and something that we can do. But at the end of the day, it also has to be profitable in order to grow. And so for the first few years, the profitability wasn't something I was focused on at all because I was majorly focused on basically delivering a quality service and making sure that they had access to all these different things. But the back of house CFO type stuff, I wasn't paying attention to because I was up in the vision, side of things. So for me, the biggest takeaway has been, making sure that while I do maintain a vision, so there's direction for the business, it's equally important that I maintain positive cash flow and I have the resources to actually execute on the vision that I have right now.
no, that's a great answer. It's like you were listening to the end of our last episode. So, well, perfect. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining us today, man. It was a pleasure having you here.
And I've been answering a bunch of questions, but do you mind if I ask both you and Greg a question?
I guess it depends on what the question is. I'm not giving up my social security number again.
Obviously, like I'm much younger than you, and you both have been in business longer than I have. So I mean, I think this would be a good opportunity to ask if you have any advice for me that I can apply to my business since you've kind of taken the last hour to learn a little bit more about me and my business.
Sure. I really like what you said about the future of, health, wellness, the types of services, bringing them together. I think about the same thing, honestly. And how does that work? And then also, not just with like people and services, but like technology and new things we learn about the body, new things we learn about the brain. So I like that you're on top of that for sure. And that you've also identified like, but it doesn't matter if it's not profitable. Like we won't
Yeah.
we won't last. Um, so I think you're going in a good direction and that can be a challenge sometimes. So I guess where I think of like tying all that together is just the importance of the right people on the team. You mentioned earlier, you know, the prioritizing the team, like the people that work for you and their experience and like their growth and everything. And that's something I think about too. To me, the team takes priority over even the clients. I mean, not that we want to provide bad services, but it's kind of like what you were saying. If I can take care of the team, then they're going to do a good job with the people we serve. Um, so that's a lesson I've learned sometimes the hard way is making sure that the people you're getting on board are the right team for your mission, your vision, your values, um, so that it can grow like in a healthy way. And where I've gotten in my own way is sometimes being impatient, and so like having the patience to like do that like more healthy organic growth that's going to really fit and carry the vision out, long term.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, prescient. So I appreciate that. I can apply that to the stage that I'm at now. So thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I kind of would piggyback on that. I would say, you've done a great job of getting clarity on your vision for the future and make sure that you keep that front and center because a lot of times business owners get so busy that they kind of let that slide by the wayside and they don't use that as they continue to make decisions. Now, obviously, that vision can change as you go with different opportunities, but continuing to ask yourself, is this the right move to take us where we want to be? And it's okay to say no to an opportunity if it's not. So I think that's one thing. And I think to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Greg said too, protect your culture at all costs, because people, a lot of times I'll see business owners who find themselves in, I've got to bring somebody on board, I've got to hire, and they do the short-term, quick, easy, knee-jerk thing, hire somebody who doesn't align with their culture, who ends up coming in, is a short-term fix, but ends up creating longer-term problems. They end up having to get rid of that person, or worse, they don't get rid of that person and they poison the other people around them, and then they're fighting a culture war. So I think, that would be probably the biggest thing I would say is, it sounds like you've built a really good culture.
Yeah, I like that. So kind of tying it together, the idea of, keeping the vision center, making sure that the team is basically supported, but then also, making sure the team supports the vision as it grows. Yeah, I appreciate that, Eric. Yeah, thank you for having me, guys. I appreciated talking to you, and it was fun. I liked it.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have you back again, man. So thanks for being here, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Business Brains and BS podcast. Remember, progress beats perfection. Hope is not a strategy, but it is a necessity. And the BS that tends to hold us back usually starts in our own heads. So if you've enjoyed this episode, follow the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, and make sure you share it with a business owner who you think needs to hear it.